Welcome to the Money Insights Podcast, where high-income earners go to learn wealth-building strategies that will take them from high income to high net worth.
Thanks so much for joining us for today's episode of the Money Insights Podcast, where we talk all things money and business. My name's Christian Allen, and I am here with two co-hosts today. I've got my regular Rod the Pod Zabriskie hanging out with us. What's going on, Rod?
Hey, doing great.
We also have Chris Odegaard back, aka the Prolific Investor. What's going on, Chris?
Hey, everything's awesome. Glad to be here.
Perfect. Well, we're excited to have you back, and I'm just going to create some context for how we got this podcast kicked off. So Chris emailed us a week or two ago and had an opportunity on another podcast to create or to build kind of his version of the recipe to financial success. And so he sent it over to us to check out and give some feedback on. We thought it was awesome and decided to collaborate and make a podcast out of it. So with that being the case, Chris, maybe what we do next is we let you talk a little bit about how you built this formula for financial success.
Sure. Well, I've been following in the steps of you guys who seem to be really good at creating top 10 lists or whatever list it is. I thought, well, I'm going to follow after Rod and Christian and see if I can put together a list of 10 of what I would consider some fundamental wealth building strategies. And so I put together this list. Actually, it's a list of 7 right now. And when I had to just list it kind of from 7 going down to 1. And then I was trying to group it into some light categories. And I thought, well, there's 4 overriding wealth building principles in addition to the steps to get there. So I created this little matrix, and it's really interesting to see which of these 7 steps, checks off which boxes on the overriding principle. So now it's kind of a little matrix, which is hard to do on a podcast, but that's how it got here.
Okay, so what if we do this? So maybe, do you want to list out everything but on both sides of the matrix initially, or maybe we at least do the principles and then we can go through the steps as we hit on those? What do you think?
Yeah, I think going over the wealth building principles would be the first thing.
Okay, let's start there. Yeah. Which one do you want to hit on first?
So, if you think about, you're an investor, you're trying to get to financial freedom, or you're trying to retire, there's 4 things that are going to determine how quickly you get there. The first thing is how much money you invest, and these aren't in any particular order. The second thing is the return, or the ROI that you get on your investment. The third thing is how much taxes you pay on the income that comes from the investments. And the fourth thing is, as your money is velocity. As your money comes out of the investments, how quickly can you get this money, stored in a nice place, like you guys have a product, and then redeployed back out. So those are the kind of, I think, the 4 wealth building principles. And then there's 7 steps that I think we could talk about, and there's a lot of debate that could go on with that.
And these are good steps. So here's the thought. Okay, just to reiterate, first one, the amount you invest, ROI, taxes, and velocity. And those are the principles that determine how quickly you get to where you're trying to get. Is that fair to say? Okay.
Yes.
So now I think what we do is we just hit on each one of these 7 principles, and we can talk about them in the context of how well they hit on the specific wealth building principles we have listed out. Okay, so Chris, kick us off with number 1.
So number 1, wow, should I call it number 1? I guess I'm not sure. Yeah, well, I got it.
Is it number 1 or number 7?
Yeah, that's the order I put them in. So let's the number 1. So number 1 is to be the best at whatever you do. Because the only money that each of us has to invest is the money that's above and beyond our living expenses. So if you're making $70,000 a year and your living expenses are 70, you have nothing to invest. So you need to have a total income of 80, 90, or 100. And the only way you have more money than your expenses to be the best at what you do, get promoted and get raises. And as long as you don't spend all that extra money, then you have more money to invest. So that's the be the best at what you do, which pretty much I think only ticks the one principle, which is the amount of money you have to invest.
But obviously a pretty critical one. So here's a thought that came to my mind as you're talking about that. The thing I like about it is that it doesn't say be the only one doing what you do, right? Which is a really difficult thing to see. Now that would be nice if we could all be the only one that's doing, had some incredible thing that we could go get wealthy off of. But we don't have to do that. And most people aren't going to do that. Rather, most of us are going to have to choose something out there that maybe other people are doing, and we're going to have to do it better than the way that other people are doing it. And that's a great way to build a business or a great way to build a career. So I like number one. I think that's a great point.
And in my experience, there can be some really simple things inside of that is not all that difficult to do. In other words, if you look around yourself at your competition, a lot of times it's not a high bar that you have to clear to be better, right? And we experience this, right? When we're out as consumers, interacting with the companies that, whether it's the manufacturer or the retailer or whatever, and sometimes you just shake your head with the different, absurd things that you run into. And so Christian and I talk a lot about this as it relates to contractors or things like that, right? It's not hard to be the best contractor when you compare to the guys that can't show up on time and can't, have a solid budget and et cetera, right? I don't mean to, harp too bad on those guys, but they just make it so easy.
Yeah, one of the rules that my dad taught me, and he said exactly what you're saying. He said, "Look, Chris, the bar's not that high. Just don't be a blank." You'll be way ahead of the game.
Yeah,
and it's so true.
Don't be whatever.
Yeah, well, and it really is true. The reason we talk so much about contractors is because I just moved into a new house a couple months ago, and I've been doing all these projects. Like I had to put in my yard. I wanted to get all of it done before the winter came, and got the basement in, and that really is. Just don't be an ass. Was that the right one? And you'll be way ahead of the curve. Because the truth is that well, all I can say is that 9 out of 10 people I dealt with I actually left that these few projects thinking okay, what I really need to do is start a consulting business that teaches contractors how to just run competent businesses, and they would just get okay. Mm-hmm. So I really like that point. I think you nailed it. I don't want to belabor too much, but that's a super important point. Chris, why don't you lead us into number 2?
So number 2 is maintain good credit, and it kind of relates to number 1. So when you're looking at being the best at what you do, you're trying to have more money. But the money that you invest doesn't all have to be yours. It can be other people's money, like from a bank. So maintaining good credit hits the principle of the amount that you have to invest. So if you've got good credit and you pick the right assets, you can, in addition to your extra money from your employment income, you can use the bank's money if you've got good credit.
This is one I hadn't thought of. And so when we saw the list, I was like, oh, that's interesting. But especially if you're a cash flow, a real estate investor, and you're going to use leverage, then in that way, maintaining good credit might be one of the most critical money saving or money making things you can do. So I love that one. I think it's an important one. Obviously, if you don't have good credit, it'll just cost you so much money, right? And for a lot of people, it might even, instead not just cost you money, it could keep you from being able to invest at all, or at least invest effectively.
Right. Well, think about the other sources of money that we go to. We go to a bank if you want to get a loan for an investment property. If we want to utilize our home equity with a home equity line of credit, we need to have a good credit to do that with our personal bank, or even just having an unsecured line of credit. So those are 3 sources of money above and beyond your extra income above your living expenses that you might not have access to if you've got bad credit.
Yeah, I think it's great.
And I would say too, And Chris, I think you do a really good job of this in your blog and in your book of emphasizing this, but using that credit and doing the levers like Christian, you talked about, it does increase your ROI as well, right? Because if you're buying a $400,000 property and you only have to come up with $100,000 of that down, finance the rest, well, you just multiplied your ROI by a bunch by doing that.
Yeah. Now you've made one correction in my matrix. Now I'm going to, in addition to checking the box that it applies to the principal, the amount you invest, you're right. It checks the ROI box, because when you're using leverage, good.
Makes a big difference. Yeah, I love that one. That's a great point, Rod.
I'm making changes on the fly here.
See, this thing is going to be brilliant by the time we're done. Okay, this next one, Chris, was interesting, and I'll just lay it out there, and you can talk about why you felt like it was something that should be on your top 7 list, and that is it says don't buy new cars, plain and simple. Don't buy new cars. That is a bad idea, but talk to us about it.
Well, so I should have made a disclaimer before we started this that, I have an abundance mentality, more so these days. When I was in my 20s, I expect to earn more money next year than this year and be in a higher tax category the year after. So I don't typically sweat. I don't sweat going to coffee every day. If I want to spend $5 on a cup of coffee every day, I don't worry about that, because I'm focused on the big picture.
You're rolling. Yep.
But if you're a young family, and I'll use myself, a single income household, with 2 kids, and you're just starting out, you probably don't have as much as an abundance mentality. So this list is kind of a mixture across that spectrum. But people have asked me, well, Chris, how did you put 2 kids through college, on one income? And I did a rough calculation, and I went, wow, if I had done what the typical American does and bought a new car, 2 new cars for both spouses every 3 to 5 years over an 18-year period, not doing that saved enough money to put 2 kids through college.
I see. So that's the method to the madness, and it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Right.
Rod only buys new cars. So I've been trying to teach him that for years, but
yes,
that's sarcasm.
This hits on the principle of how much you have to invest, because that money that wasn't spent on new cars, could go to investing or kids through college or whatever. So, Rod, unless you want to correct me on this one, I think it hit on just.
I think that's good. And
so, Rod, you had a great thought on this. Oh, you were probably going to jump into it, but go into that, because I think this is a super important principle.
Yeah, I think really what you're getting at is recognizing opportunity cost, right? And so that example of by instead of getting new cars, you were getting used cars, and it doesn't even have to be. It could be just 2 or 3 year old car, and you save a ton on that, right? You put 2 kids through college. Well, the same principle could apply against a lot of different things, right? It's just the opportunity cost, right? It's putting our priorities where it's going to allow us to get to where we want to go. Right. And so if we're frivolous in our spending, take the $5 cup of coffee, right? And if when you were in your 20s, you insisted on doing that instead of some of the other things that you did instead, then you would be in a different place today than otherwise, right? And so the principle can apply. Now, again, it's a priority thing. All of us spend money where we spend the money, but because we spend it there, we don't have it to do otherwise with it. And so it's recognizing that idea and then looking at ourselves and the way that we budget, the way that we spend, the way that we live, and saying, are there things that I could tweak that wouldn't fundamentally change my lifestyle, right? Having a 2 or 3 year old car instead of having, the brand new one all the time, probably for most people doesn't fundamentally change the way they live, aside from maybe the pride or whatever, right? The image, that part of it. But other than that, we can do amazing things like put our kids through college, and that'll have a much larger impact on our lives than always having the newest.
So was Christian joking when he said Rod only buys new cars?
He was joking because it's the exact opposite. We recently bought the newest car we've ever had, and it's 5 years old.
Yeah, right.
So
I'm usually telling Rod, like, could you just like update that car a few years, man? I'm worried he's going to get stuck on the side of the road if he doesn't, I tease.
Well,
no, Rod's very smart when it comes to money. He's a really good example of using those principles. And so, that's why I threw it out there.
I'll bet I have you. I have never purchased a new car. 59 years old, never purchased a new car, and I'll bet I got you beat. One of the cars that's sitting out the driveway is a '92 Ford F-150 pickup, but I'll bet nobody has a car to sell.
That is impressive.
Not in this room.
You're doing it, my friend. Okay, well, that's nice to know. I think people want to know that, hey, if we're throwing these out here, that, we try to live the principles. Now, can I just say on this, Rod, you can take the opportunity cost thing a little too far, and you gave a good example of this. And so I just want to let everybody know that, like, buying an iPad, according to Rod, is off the table. You don't want to buy an iPad.
Yeah.
And talk about
the opportunity
why.
cost is too great. Yeah. So Christian and I were sitting in a presentation one time, and I almost fell off my chair. But anyway, they were talking about this principle of opportunity cost, and they said, so take an iPad. You spend $700 on this thing and spread that out across your lifetime. But it's not just your lifetime. You have less money to pass on to your kids and then to their kids. And 2 generations later, all of a sudden, it's $1 million iPad. And I was like, wow, this may be taken a little too far.
See?
I get the principle.
Chris,
but
have you ever considered that each cup of coffee you're drinking might be worth $1 million?
I've never thought of it that way, but it's one of the it's you got to pick and choose. It's one of those luxuries that I allow myself.
Okay, so
I would say the fact that I've never bought a new car in 59 years.
You deserve the right to have a cup of coffee.
Probably have a couple of coffees now.
Yeah.
Well, and I can also say this, like, just knowing enough people who drink their morning cup of coffee, it's like what helps them to be productive. So not having it might be the opportunity cost. Okay. Well, that's a
great point too, Christian, because again, going back to the priority, but because when I threw that example earlier to Christian, he says, well, maybe the iPad is what makes the person, who they are and successful in whatever they do.
Yeah,
right?
that was the tool that launched their business, which made them outrageously successful. So you can take it either way, right? But the principle of not buying a new car and thinking about opportunity cost when we're making purchases just makes a lot of sense, and it absolutely will have an impact on how much money we're able to accumulate throughout our lives. Okay,
Can I insert a story before we move on?
Oh, please.
Yeah.
So along the lines of coffee and cars, and one of the things that I do on the second Friday of every month is I drive to a local coffee shop here in Summerville, South Carolina, and meet up with another investor. And we both happen to drive red Corvettes, and we show up at the coffee shop. Him in his brand new Corvette, and me in my 2003 Z06. And of course, Rod knows this, that I've got my name on to buy the first new car ever, which is the Z06 version of the Corvette that's coming out next year. So,
that's going to be the first
remind me,
one.
is it going to be a 23? It's going to be 2023?
Well, the model, the Z06 in the mid-engine C8 will be a 2022 model year. I probably won't see mine until 2023. But
I see.
Anyway, so I'm
right.
really going to do it. I figured this is the right car to do it on.
You've earned the right.
Yeah.
Very cool.
But the coffee thing. So, I mean, just part of getting together with investors, having a cup of coffee and sitting around talking for 60 to 90 minutes about what's going on. That's a worthwhile expense.
Yeah,
absolutely.
100%. Okay. Rod, why don't you bring us into number 4, and then you can let Chris pontificate.
Okay. So number 4 Chris has on his list is invest until it hurts.
I love it. Until it hurts, Chris. What does that mean?
Well, this is really the budgeting item. So I have talked with people, and they've asked me about budgeting, and some people can track every dime that they spend on everything. And to me, that's too much work. So pick a number, a percentage, or a dollar amount that just makes you a little bit uncomfortable and say, this is the amount that we're going to save and put toward investments every week, every month, whatever it is. And after that, you can spend everything else. If there's money for coffees and new cars or whatever, that's great. But pick that number and make that the part that goes away. And you need to make it a little bit uncomfortable. And then when you get those raises, plow some or all of that money into that amount so that you've got more money going into investments as you go along.
Yeah, I think it's good advice.
By experience, I can say you got to take that out first.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
If you don't take it out first, it's just going to go away. As well-intentioned as you may be, that at the end of the month you'll move that into something else. No, you have to move it at the beginning of the month or the beginning of that period when you receive that money before you start spending the rest.
Yeah, you got to make it just as easy as your 401k. It just comes right off. Comes right off the top, and you never see it.
I think it's good advice.
And so that one, what's interesting, so that one again ticks the amount you invest principal. So
yeah. Okay, I like number 5, Chris, but I'm excited to hear you talk about number 5 rather than hearing Rod talk about number 5. So bring us in on number 5.
So thanks to my association and friendship with you guys, I have become a huge proponent of cash value life insurance. And I say regularly that this should be the foundation of every serious investor's portfolio. It should be at the base of the hierarchy of investors in terms of what's the first thing that you do. So you've got this money above and beyond your living expenses, and that money needs to go somewhere until you've accumulated enough money to make that larger investment, perhaps, if you're a cash flow investor like a lot of your listeners are, and they're saving up money for down payments or syndications or whatever. So this allows you to put it in, get a decent interest rate, 5%, let's say, in a credited, protected, tax-free environment, and you can borrow using that as collateral. So it's the investment optimizer is awesome, which is the product that I use. But I was just talking with a newly minted physician yesterday on a virtual coffee who he said, I'll be an accredited investor in January. Where do I start? And he'll be giving you guys a call. But I said that the other product, based on the Index Universal Life, is probably the better product for him because he's 30-something years old and he's got a longer time frame than I do. So the cash value life insurance hits all the buckets, really, because you can invest more, because you can borrow money. You're getting a decent ROI on your money while it's sitting around. Instead of 0.4%, you're getting 5%. The earnings that come out of it are tax-free, and it gives you velocity. It gives you a place to store that money while it's going off to its next ultimate destination.
Love it. I couldn't have said it any better. Rod, do you have anything to add to cash value life insurance?
I just want to learn more about it. It sounds fantastic.
It does sound like a good one. No, I think it is a good point, because once you understand the basics and get past some of the old notions that are false, I guess, for lack of a better way of saying it, I think once you understand how the product works, it's just a simple no-brainer, because it helps you to improve, to create additional return that you wouldn't have otherwise. And so once you get that point, it just becomes kind of a no-brainer to do over and over again. Okay, we talk plenty about life insurance, so we're not going to spend a lot of time on that one. Chris, what is number 6?
Number 6 is invest in real estate. And I know you guys, I love listening to your podcast, and sometimes you guys, you kind of toe in the line between really hammering conventional investments versus all these guys are being way too easy.
But you don't have to be, Chris. You just go.
So the reason that you invest in real estate is because it gives you higher returns, because you can use leverage. You get huge tax benefits through depreciation, and through refinancing and things, you can get your principal back out quicker. So it hits 3 of those 4 wealth building principles. I mean, you're not going to get that with stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. So I think when you build a list like this, you say, oh, here's the 7 things. I think when you layer over the wealth building principles, that tells people why It's one thing to
Yeah,
tell
that's
them
a good way to think
7
about it.
steps, but the wealth building principles say, like, here's why you should invest in real estate.
That's good. So on the left hand, we've got what to do. On the across the right, we've got why to actually do it. That's cool. That's a good way to think about it. I don't know if I need to say a lot more about that. We're huge proponents of real estate and cash flowing assets, but you brought up another good point that's not directly on the list, but it's one that I thought about, and that is the component of adding leverage or incorporating leverage into your investing. And so obviously it is possible to invest in real estate without using leverage, but that's not normally the way that we do it, right? And I think a big part of the reason that people invest in real estate is because it's easy or it's so common to be able to utilize leverage while we're doing it, which is, by the way, far more difficult in the traditional world. Stocks, it can be done. I'm not saying it's impossible here, but it's just more work. It's more difficult. Less people are proficient and know how to do it. And so from that standpoint, real estate and life insurance, which carry a lot of the same characteristics, end up basically hitting all the boxes. And so from that standpoint, it's a no-brainer for wealth building.
You through this comment here and previous one, I wrote down leverage on my pad here. It's like, how does that fit in here? What might that look like in revision 1? So, you got a really good point there. And I'm not sure if that goes across the top with the principles it's kind of covered in a couple of them.
Yep, it is.
Right.
It is.
There might be a better way to visually, and practically integrate that into this little story here.
But I think your point is right on, though. I mean, we commonly do it when we invest and we invest in real estate. It's kind of obvious, but I think for people, if you're listening to this and you have the choice between utilizing leverage and not, now you want to be smart about it, but utilizing leverage will be, if not the maybe strongest principle that will get us there, it's certainly one of them.
Yeah.
And I think one of the reasons that it ticks the boxes and works with the leverage is, as our friend Buck Joffrey likes to talk about, it's a hard asset, right? As compared to a lot of the other things, you mentioned stock, bond, mutual funds, other things like that. It's a hard asset. And so that's one of the reasons why it has the tax benefits associated with it, why the government likes people to and wants to incentivize people to invest in real estate. But it's also one of the reasons why it's easy for banks to get on board with the leverage side, because there's something that behind it that's more than just the paper, and so I think that's a big part of it as well.
Okay, so
it's interesting though. Everybody hasn't gotten the message that there's a difference between good debt and bad debt. I know people that
you're right.
They want to own their house free and clear, and I've always said that if that's what helps you sleep at night and gives you peace of mind, that's okay. But if you think you're doing it for a solid financial reasons, you're mistaken. And I also know people that have rental properties and they own them free and clear, and that was a goal. And when you sit down and show them what adding a 70 or 80% leverage on a house does to the ROI, they go, "Oh, I really, really kind of missed the boat on this." I'm like, "Yeah, you did."
Yeah. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, and it can be an emotional decision, right? Sometimes people just prefer it. But if the key is to know it going in. If you're making that emotional decision because you choose to, that's great. You just don't want to be missing it.
Yeah, I don't fault anybody for doing it because it makes them feel good. Just as long as they know the other side, that they're looking at the business case and looking at the feel good part versus the hard, financial realities of what that could be.
Yeah, and that goes back to opportunity cost as well, right? You have that value. You have it is part of your net worth, but if depending on where you live, $300,000 to $1 million worth of your net worth is tied up in equity in your home. And again, it's not that it's not doing anything for you, but it could be doing growing that asset and be leveraged to be doing something somewhere else as well. And so it becomes a big opportunity cost if you're not doing that.
I think, Rod, you just hit on another article, I think. And that is just, all this stuff is not new, but it's putting it in a different way that might get somebody. So if you if somebody said, well, it just makes me feel good to have my house paid off. If you showed them what that feel good feeling is costing them in opportunity costs, they might make a different decision if you put the numbers at them, right? Well, I feel great. Are you willing to? Is it worth $1 million for you to feel that way?
Well, especially when you can frame it in a way where, because for most people, it's like, hey, I don't want to lose my home, which is the emotional part of it, right? That's legitimate. But if you have other assets that mean at any point in time you could pay off that loan, but you choose to carry the loan because it means that you can do more things with it, then you can kind of get best of both worlds. Because liquidity, like all these things are very important. We need to make sure that we're doing them and not neglectful of something. But I mean, I've run into a lot of people who pay extra on their home and don't even have the liquidity, right? So it's
and not realizing
let's live somewhere in the middle, right?
So I only had 3 of the wealth building principles checked. I had ROI, taxes, and I only had ROI and taxes. And now I really need to check the amount you can invest, because real estate allows you to use leverage. So
absolutely,
right. That's a good point.
Next revision right there.
Okay, so Chris, I like what you did with number 7. If I'm being totally honest, that one wouldn't have even crossed my mind, and maybe embarrassingly so, but lead us into number 7, because it's as important as any of them.
Well, it's funny. My son is 29 years old. He's a commercial real estate broker in Seattle, and he told me this last week.
Good wisdom from your son.
Yeah, I can't remember what the context was, but he had heard or read something, and I went, that is absolutely right. And as a guy who has been divorced a couple times, I can attest to the fact that this is true. So, make your spouse a priority is number 7, and that is going to check everything. The amount you have to invest, the return, the taxes, and the velocity. I mean, it's like an atomic bomb in the middle of your financial life as well as emotional life. So. If you don't make your spouse a priority, everything's going to suffer.
Yeah, that's good advice. Rod, you've been married for what, 20 plus years?
25 years.
25.
Here in months.
Gosh, I didn't. Wow,
yeah.
25.
That's how I feel too.
I'm curious.
Wow.
You've got the best track record. Tell us from your experience, what's this like, or how important has that been for you guys and your family?
Yeah, well, no, and it's a challenge. It takes a concerted, focus to do it. So, and maybe I'll just throw out a couple things. So, my wife and I make it a priority to have a weekly date, and it's not easy to do. Again, we have the 7 kids. We have I stay busy with what I'm doing. She's very busy with what she's doing, but when we plan our week, we nail down a day of when we're going to have that time together. Because if we don't, it doesn't happen. I mean, it doesn't just accidentally happen that we end up just the 2 of us, in anywhere, because, of all the other stuff going on. But
so that's a good advice. So
maybe a simple one.
Like, make time for each other. So making a priority, like you're saying, one of the ways that we make them a priority, each other a priority, is just defining specific time. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah. Because what I often hear from people is we fell out of love, or we got so focused on the things that didn't involve our spouse that we maybe neglected, and all of a sudden found that we just didn't know each other, like we used to. And anyway, so hearing those things, motivated us to kind of put that in place, make sure that we stay connected.
Good advice. And as you said, Chris, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I have one thought, and then I want you to not forget what you were saying. As you said earlier, Chris, this could be the most expensive poor decision if you make it. So if for no other reason than financially, it is catastrophic to have to go through divorce, right? Like it's obviously really hard. So, are there any other thoughts that you have as it relates to this one?
Yeah. So, Rod, how many kids did you say you had?
We have 7.
7. So I'm going to share a little dirty laundry here, and hopefully whoever I'm this will never find its way. I have 2 kids, right? I have a former spouse that to this day would say, Chris, I'm sorry I couldn't make you the number one priority. The kids were the number one priority. And I would say, and still say, well, if you and I don't make each other a priority, there won't be a family left at the end of this thing for the kids to be a part of.
Yeah.
And I use the example, when you get on the airplane and they're going through the safety discussion, they say, look, if you have small children, you put your mask on first so that you can be around to help your children. And that's kind of the analogy. I think there are a lot of people who would say what one of my former spouses said, oh, sorry, you can't be the priority. The kids are more important. And I will differ to that. I will disagree with that from now until eternity, until somebody changes my mind.
Yeah. Yeah, I can agree with that.
Okay, good advice. So, quick, Chris, just list them out for us, 1 through 7, and then we'll close up shop for today.
Okay, yeah. The 7 steps to becoming financially independent or retiring are to be the best at what you do in your job or your business, whatever that is. Maintain good credit, so you've got borrowing power. Don't buy new cars, or that could be expanded to, we could find a generic term for that one. Don't buy new cars. Not doing so will help you put 2 kids through college or whatever else. Use a macro budgeting technique. It's easier. Invest until it hurts and then spend the rest. Have the appropriate cash value life insurance policy for you and your age that Rod and Christian will design for you. Invest in real estate because it gives you all the advantages of velocity, taxes, higher returns, and allows you to invest more because you can use leverage. And make your spouse a priority. Otherwise, you will have a big problem.
Amen. I think we can give this the Money Insights stamp of approval. So that's what you got for it. All right. Rod, do you have anything else you want to hit on it as it relates to the Matrix?
No, sorry, one thing. I always say no. When you ask that, I say no, and then I say
then you're
yes.
like, oh, wait.
Okay, yes, I do. Yeah. So the thing I think is really cool about this is it's like the experience of Chris and his kids, right? You mentioned the one that came from your son. And that's what I think is really cool about it. It's not, I mean, he's not putting himself out there as, hey, I have all these credentials of retirement planning and all these kinds of things. It's just like, someone who has lived through it and is living it and said, hey, these are the things that I think are really important in getting you there. And I agree with them. I can't disagree with any of them.
Well, I want to get along those lines of not having any advanced degrees. I'm poke fun at Rod a little bit and a bunch of other people in a friendly way. Since I don't do any of those, I wanted to put an acronym behind my name just to be a smart ass. Since Christian said ass, I could say ass.
Yeah, this is mostly family friendly.
Yeah, Chris Odegaard, NAD, on my next business card, meaning no advanced degrees.
I love it, but you have the experience, so that's
absolutely,
and that's every bit as important as the acronyms. I can tell you that from experience.
Well, and as long as we're throwing that word out there, tell us a little about your book, Chris. I don't think it was out when we interviewed you last.
Yes, tell us about their book and where they can find you.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I'm the Prolific Investor, and you can find out all about me at theprolificinvestor.net. And just about the 1st of November, my book came out called Get Off Your Ass and Manage Your Money, Why You Need Alternative Investments. And this is an easy read, 100-page book. You can read it in an hour or two, but it's meant to really grab the attention of all those people that are on what I call the 401 highway to mediocrity, and they're using stocks, bonds, and mutual funds to get there. And frankly, 92% of investors are never going to get to retirement using the 401k, because if you want to have the median income of just a mere $65,000 in retirement, you need a 401k portfolio of multiple millions of dollars using what's now used to be the 4% rule, now the 3% rule. Anyway, You go to
Right.
prolificinvestor.net, there's a link there. It'll take you to where you can buy the book. So a lot of great reviews come out on the book. So it's being well received.
Yeah, and do Chris's quiz. I love the quiz that's on your website as well.
Yes,
At
the quiz.
prolificinvestor.net, there's a conventional wisdom quiz, and I hate to say that I think Rod missed one.
Oh,
I did.
man,
Yeah.
Rod.
And I knew they were trick. Well, not. I shouldn't say that. They're not trick questions, but they're just like you said. It's conventional wisdom. It's like, what is this? And I thought, okay, I'm gonna try to reverse engineer this with Chris, and I just overthought it.
I think I even know which one you missed, but I'm not going to say. I don't want to give away the answer.
Okay, well,
Perfect.
I think this has been fun. Thanks, guys, for hanging out. We appreciate everybody for joining us. Make sure to subscribe. Give us a review on iTunes. It means a lot. And we'll see you all next week on the Money Insights Podcast.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for listening to the Money Insights Podcast. To learn more about the financial and business strategies discussed in this show, visit moneyinsights.net.